from the rest of the show. So X-Men 97, Mike, you were up to date. Correct me if I'm wrong on the.
Correct.
So you've watched Life Death Part 2 and now Bright Eyes, and I was able to watch Bright Eyes last night. So we're all on the same page. So let's get into Life Death Part 2, which is the episode where Storm gets her powers back, which is no surprise to anybody who's been watching this show.
I mean, one way to describe that episode, to me, that is the episode where Charles Xavier comes back.
Yes,
I feel like that's the headline on the front page for that one.
Question, if I'm raising my hand here in person, which is not you can't see me, but question for you, Mike. Mm-hmm. Are you watching this on Disney Plus?
Yes.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. In episode 1, before episode 1, they did a recap of the X-Men 94 series, right? And and in that recap, they say Charles Xavier is thought to be dead, but he's really living with the Shi'ar, correct? They kind of give that away in the recap, or were you surprised to find him alive?
I don't remember exactly what they said in the recap. I knew he wasn't going to be dead because we are too chronically involved with X-Men and superheroes
Comic
in general.
books, people can't say dead. That's how
but
it
I
works.
mean. My wife isn't really into this show as well, and I think most people just enjoying the show just as a normal human being, aka not us, are not going to remember the recap from the very first episode, recapping an entire series of a cartoon show. Right. So when he came back to life, my wife was like, "Oh, I thought he was supposed to be dead." So she was kind of confused, and I was like, "Well." At the end of the show, he was dead, but he's kind of taken by aliens, so he's still alive. So I could see that being a little bit of a sticking point for somebody that's just jumping on the X-Men 97 because they do kind of hit you over the head in every episode. Xavier is dead. He's dead. He's not coming back. He's dead. We got to do this on our own.
They very much leave
dead.
the Earth people very much are operating under the functionality that he is deceased and not alive, right?
Yeah,
and that'll come up in the next episode we talk about Bright Eyes. But you're right. I forget that Life Death was I forgot the Charles Xavier part, if I'm going to be completely honest, and I feel bad.
Which is great. I mean, the episode does two things really, really well because Storm is off on her own and Charles is off on her own, and they both have no idea through their trials and tribulations that this genocide is happening on Genosha of all of these X-Men. So them both realizing it towards the end of the episode of Storm sees it on the news, and then Charles just perceives it, when Gambit dies because he can feel his X-Men just leaving this plane of existence, which is crazy because he's not even in their galaxy. I don't know what galaxy he's in, but that really mean sister. I don't remember her name.
The ghetto Milky Way.
Yeah, which was really funny to think like, oh yeah, people could. There is another race that could perceive our entire galaxy as just some sort of like Terran wasteland, as they would call us. But it was, I mean, it's great. This show is so great. Everything is great about it. The only episode that I really haven't been super into was the Life Death Part 1 because it just kind of felt incomplete overall. Cool stuff happened in it for sure, but it just felt like I did not feel satisfied after watching it. But these two episodes were amazing. Yeah,
Life Death Part 2, I think the episode, the Storm episode was split in half, if you will, right? Essentially, it's one full episode in two different areas. But to me, after seeing Remember It, it makes sense why the second half was here, right? We watched Remember It, everybody, thousands of mutants have died, and we come into Life Death Part 2, and it's kind of a hope like, Charles is trying to bridge gaps with the Shi'ar and become accepted with them. Storm is learning to deal with the adversary and get her powers back and become essentially a new Storm, if you will. Like, she has new hair, she has her new outfit with the wings, which is from the comic books. It's fantastic. So it was a little bit of a hopeful episode, after an episode of just absolute utter gut punch, rip your heart out kind of thing. So I think that was great. I love both of those episodes. It was really interesting to me for Life Death Part 2, the Xavier part, the intro. You get to deal with the Mean Sister and her crew. You get to see the Gladiator the character Gladiator.
Dude, Gladiator was so cool. Like, it's always great when you can take a character and then, they're just plugging these iconic characters into their animation pipeline. And they're just like, hey, what obscure X-Men character do you want to be the coolest thing ever this week? Oh, let's do it to Gladiator. And he's essentially using all of Superman's powers. So my assumption is when this character was invented in the comic books, they're like, oh, just make him Superman. Because that's exactly what he's doing, basically, on the screen.
Well, the Shi'ar Empire, there's there's the Smasher and a couple other people on the team, and they're all imbued their powers when they get that role. So Gladiator, gets the role and he gets his powers. It's great, but to see there's a dude there with his flaming eyes. I don't know if you remember this. There's a character there with flaming eyes who's about to, I guess, execute the people that are attacking the Kree. That's Vulcan, who is the third Summers brother. He's the brother of Scott Summers, who comes up in comic books later. So it's cool to see him in space, and Vulcan's a deep cut for me, and I absolutely love that. So it was really cool to see these deep cut characters. Even in Bright Eyes, Morph takes on the role of Quicksilver for a little bit, which was really fun to see. So I loved how the show is able to do a bunch of deep cut characters, but not make it feel gratuitous. Like it feels like, oh yeah, this would be here in that moment, right, kind of thing, along the way. The Shi'ar thing, I think that part of the episode is forgettable to me because that story trope is like as old as time, right? Like, oh, we want to get married. We're two different cultures. How will you ever fit in with my culture? My sister wants to rule the team because, me marrying you isn't right. So that was a trope as old as time, if you will. But the fun part was where Charles is like, I'm going to be a teacher now and teach all you stuff kind of things. He used, what was the word he used? He's like, demerits. I'm like, oh God, he's a British school teacher.
Yeah, he took him to school. It was great. But you were talking about how the storyline did seem a little rote to the point where my wife and I were like yelling at the screen, and I was like, how dare you ask Charles to give up his memories so he can be with you? That's changing who he is as a person down to his core. You wouldn't even be marrying the same man. So it's just like we're almost like not mad at the show. We're mad at her for thinking that Charles should do that for her. And I'm glad he kind of came to his senses that, he can't change who he is. But it is definitely a struggle. I could believe a character in this very unique situation could be struggling with this idea of like, he's struggled his whole life and now he can finally have this freedom and acceptance, but he can't even really get accepted around these people anyway. So it really hits home.
A bunch of old cronies running that show is what they made it.
I think the giant Gambit skeleton. That was a moment that I had to go back and pause and look at because I was like, oh, this is metal. This is like the front of a metal album for sure.
Yeah. And then the not to belittle the Storm thing, coming to terms with Forge and the character, the adversary, who's just like chomping at her doubts, right, the whole time, like, oh, you're negative, like you're no one, you're nothing, you without your powers, kind of thing. It was fun to see that and see her kind of overcome that journey along the way for that character. I'm glad to see Storm, and I love to see her come back in her black outfit, if you will, the queen of the elements is what that outfit is. So that was great. But jumping into this week's episode, Bright Eyes, we come back to Earth, we come back to the X-Men. Boy, they give Rogue some badass animation sequences here, even with a throwback to her Marvel versus Capcom kick scenes, right? Like there's like a panel with her foot coming down towards the screen there. I'm like, oh man, they're really having a good time having Rogue beat the shit out of these General Ross's base, if you will.
Yeah, this is one thing that I always love about animation or cartoons in general. It creates a world in which I can believe if a character gets mad enough, their power level will increase like tenfold. Like this is like the DBZ coded brain that I was grew up with, of just like, oh yeah, you give any superhero a reason enough to go fight somebody and they'll be unstoppable. I mean, we kind of saw that with Gambit when he was trying to save Rogue, the love of his life. He put it all on the line and he was able to do the unthinkable and blow up this gigantic like master mold. And then Rogue, when she's pissed off and she believes she's lost two of the loves of her life, she can like fly into his secret government facility, and she can like literally slap tanks together, and it's amazing.
Yeah, well, that, and they're like, oh, we built, they obviously set it up. They're like, okay, we built this base to deal with the Hulk, and then she busts through the ceiling, and they're like, oh, okay, she is upset. She's on a mission here. We're not gonna let her slow down. So we got to see that. They're looking for Henry Gyrick, the creator of the Sentinels. That's the whole point of this, right? We're gonna find the person who made this big master mold and did the massacre along the way. Then we also get to see, speaking of Rogue, at the end of the episode, she is not for mercy. She is not out for forgiveness. She is out for blood, if you will, life for life. And she drops him off the top of the building, which was a cold moment for X-Men. Like, we've seen a lot of them be humane and forgiving, and like, I don't want to do this, but this is what we have to do to be thing. And Rogue doesn't prescribe to that, if you will, right? At the end of the day, she's very much out for emotional compensation at the end of the day. So it was interesting. It was great. I love every one of these episodes, Mike. They all come together in such great way. They all deliver more than I expect when I'm watching them, and I can't put my finger on what it is sometimes, but I'm like, I don't expect you to be this good of an animated show, a cartoon show. I expect the action and the excitement of seeing flashy colors and funny powers, but there's a scene where Beast is talking to the reporter, right? Telling her like, kind of saying like, we're tired of, thank you for your, it's not acceptance, your tolerance, right? We don't want to be tolerated. We want to save mutant lives. And it was interesting to kind of find that through this episode. I will say the end, there's two things. The end of the Bright Eyes sticks out to me, Mike. And I don't know if you want to talk about anything before we get to the end.
No, I wanted to bring that up because this was interesting because they really lead up to this reveal of like, oh, who is the big bad that's been pulling the strings these whole time? And I'm racking my brain of just like, oh, what big X-Men villain is this going to be? Is this, who are we going to see? Is this going to be like, Apocalypse, or who am I going to see revealed from the shadow? And then I was like, oh, it's just some dude. Yeah. He doesn't look familiar to me. I did a little bit of Googling. And it seems to be a character that exists already within, the lore of X-Men. Yeah. I am not familiar with the guy at all.
So the villain comes out to be Bastion. Bastion is a character who was created in 96, so he would have been created about the time the animated show was wrapping up. So he wouldn't have had time to be in there. But he is the culmination of the combination of two Sentinels, the Master Mold, which you're familiar with, right? Uh-huh. And then the Nimrod Sentinel. Are you familiar with the Nimrod Sentinel?
Oh, yeah, Nimrod. What do I know Nimrod from? That sounds so familiar.
He is like purple and white and has like a big, like a upside down diamond kind of stature, like a silhouette when you look at him.
Yeah.
So it's the evolution of the Sentinels, if you will. So he is the combination of those two characters in the comic books, and so he doesn't really know in the comic books. He doesn't originally know that he's a combination. He comes to find out that he is that. So he can create prime Sentinels out of people, as we saw in this episode, right, with Henry Gyrick. Whenever he died and kind of, or not died, but he came back as a prime Sentinel with the ability to really take down the Sentinels. And he's working with Mr. Sinister, which we've kind of seen set up as a villain. I thought he was going to be the big villain reveal, not Bastion, at the end of this. But they are working together to create Sentinels that do take down mutants at the end of the day, or at least neutralize the X-Men along the way for that. So we're going to get the next 3 episodes are 3-parters, some really deep Sentinel lore, but the thing that stops them is an electromagnetic pulse, if you will, or whatever it was called, by Cable, who is officially back in these episodes, Mike. Cable, the time traveler X-Men, who is the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor.
And Scott knows now because that was revealed in that last episode. And Cable doesn't really seem to want to waste time trying to talk to his dad. So definitely some parent issues there. Some family drama happening between the two of them.
It's a Summers family. It's not a Summers family. There's no drama involved in.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. I wonder, I know this show, you're probably not supposed to be dissecting the timeline so much, but Scott did have an interesting line where, because Cable has existed in this animated universe already before. He's already been a
Yes.
character that's interacted with the X-Men, come and gone. They've had their own adventures, right? And him going, oh, this whole time it's just been you. So that makes me wonder, oh yeah, has the Cable that we've seen at the early version of the X-Men animated series always been Scott Summers' son?
Yeah.
Or maybe he has and just nobody knew, so there was no point to bring it up. So, it was a good, smart line to kind of drop in to kind of be like, okay, we get it. We know Cable's been in this show before, but now there's a little different reason behind it.
Yeah, he's always, in the comic books, it's always been Nathan Summers. It's always been Scott Summers' son. Now, maybe it's not this Scott Summers, but like they are leaning into that in the show, and I think that's great to do that. Now, I will say Cable has the power to, this episode is very adamant about burying Gambit, right? Having a funeral and putting him in the ground. Do you think Cable will bring Gambit back because of, again, A, he's a very hugely popular character over the years, and B, to kind of undo this? But like, I don't want them to undo anything. I feel like, death is death when they bury a body, right? Like, that's the important part. They buried a body, and Gambit had his send off, and we're evolving as a world going forward without him at the end of the day, despite how cool he is. And then the reveal that Magneto's alive, obviously, and is getting a shave by the Bastion character at the end of it was kind of wild a little bit.
Yeah, very, very weird. Obviously not surprised that he's still alive. I mean, we saw Gambit, as clear as day, die and then get buried in the ground. And then we're not going to believe Magneto's dead because he kind of died behind an explosion, and then there was no funeral.
Yeah. But, there's a lot to go in these 3 episodes. I honestly, like, despite my knowledge of the comic books and knowing these characters, I have no idea where they're going to go. I'm very... intrigued. I'm excited. The end also the end of this episode brings everything together, right? It shows Bastion knows Xavier is still alive despite nobody else knowing this. He has Magneto alive in his captivity. He can turn any human into a prime sentinel that he wants, and Cable's back. So like literally all these elements stirring into this pot together for X-Men 97 say whatever you think is going to happen, to hell with you, because we have all the elements to shake it around and deliver anything that you don't expect in the next 3 episodes. Like I said, as a 3-parter, I have no idea what to expect, but I love watching this show. I love watching X-Men 97 deal with these stories. I love watching the animation, the quality of it, but also not being respective of the traditional animation of the 90s. The storylines, the voice acting, why is this coming together so perfectly, Mike? How did they do this in a vacuum and then release it for us so well?
Just a lot of care, a lot of attention, and like we always say, the original source material is good, so it's not so much of a surprise that this has been even better. But it's just nice to watch something that's so good, right?
Yeah. It is. If you feel the reverence to the source material, both the comics and the show, and I don't want just 1 season. I want 3 seasons. Give me 3 seasons. I don't need 5. Give me 3. I'll be happy with 3. I think the original one even had 4. So if we have to do 4 seasons, we'll do 4 seasons. But I'm just thoroughly impressed that they're able to make this in a vacuum, not related to the MCU, but still deliver on everything Marvel and X-Men along the way. And I am here for the X-Men in 2024, Mike. My hands are raised for the X-Men this year. So cross fingers that this continues to deliver for 3 weeks, and then Deadpool and Wolverine delivers on some more X-Men. To wrap the show up, I'm going to talk about Fallout myself. Mike, you've watched this whole show.